You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. This is 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. Over the past 20 years, charges of inefficiency and ineffectiveness by Cincinnati city government have steadily increased. Recently, charges of outright corruption facilitated by political connections have emerged. Though common in many cities, Cincinnati has been remarkably free of this kind of problem since the charter reforms of 1924. The heart of the controversy revolves around the Empire Theater debacle. In 2001, Council approved $228,000 in loans and grants for LaShawn Pettis Brown, a basketball player and would-be developer, to restore the Empire Theater over the Rhine. Brown and the money skipped town. The original draft of an internal audit of the deal completed in October charged that members of the mayor and the manager's staff exercised improper influence on the community development office. But as 12 News reporter Rich Jaffe revealed last week, the fate of the report at the hands of the city manager's staff has only compounded the problem.
When the internal audit manager was satisfied with the review of what was supposed to be done to the building that once stood here, he submitted what he thought was his final report for approval. That report then underwent 8 more revisions. And when he finally got it back from the city manager's office, his 10-page report had been shortened by 3 entire pages. In fact, it didn't even have his name on it anymore. Missing were things like specific references to assistant city managers and comments like the one saying, had council members been given a full report, it's unlikely they would have voted for the project. In the meeting today, the finance director who works for the city manager and was the supervisor of the audit said the changes came from Valerie Lemmy's office.
I think there was a concern on her part not to go overboard on being particularly critical or making comments involving the mayor and city council.
But the city manager says she simply offered guidance.
And I didn't offer any specifics. I didn't do any editing. I didn't do any underlining. I left that to the responsibility of the people whose task it was, Bill and his audit team, to make certain that the audit was credible. So it was never any intent on my part or anybody else's part to hide any information. There's still references there to the mayor and members of council.
But while auditors say the significant issues indeed remained, they and others worry about too much city control.
The internal audit committee of the city consists of 5 people, 3 members of council and 2 outside members who have corporate audit experience. That committee has been calling for reform of the internal audit function for months, only to be frustrated by the administration. I am joined this morning by David Crowley, a member of the Cincinnati City Council and a member of the Internal Audit Committee, and Pat DeWine, who's also a member of council and a member of the audit committee. I asked Rita McNeil, the city solicitor, or someone from the administration to join us, but they declined. Good morning. Welcome to the Good morning.
Hi, Dan.
I'd like to begin by reading something from a motion that the 2 of you signed and submitted on March the 18th, 2003. And I think it's important that that date be remembered. And in this, it's a proposal to reform the internal audit function. You make a statement, and it says, in the wake of Enron, WorldCom, and other corporate accounting scandals, businesses across the country are trying to create a strong, independent internal audit function. Yet, in this year's budget, the city did just the opposite. It took away the independence of the city's internal auditor and made it a part of the budget office. The auditor now reports to the people he is supposed to be watching. Do we have a case here where the city is running in the opposite direction of everybody else in the country and the chickens have just come home to roost?
I think we do. I mean, everyone else seems to think that everyone else is trying to add more checks and balances, so there's some independence and some real accountability. We're doing just the opposite. The limited checks and balances that we had have been taken away. Last year in the budget, the city manager got rid of the independence of the internal audit office. This year, she's getting rid of independent OMI that used to conduct investigations of the city administration. So there's going to be no checks or balances.
Dave, how independent was it before this last, what you were referencing there in that?
Well, for years it's been in the city manager's office until this past January 2003 when it was reorganized again and it was put into the budget or the finance office. But it's never been completely independent. It's always reported to the city manager. And I just like to point out, Dan, that Pat and I started on this effort for more independence long before these recent scandals.
And that's why I wanted to make that date clear.
Even before March March 18th, we had started looking at this probably in the fall of 2002 with the idea, and we looked at other cities and how it's done. And some cities have independently elected auditors, and some have very controlled auditors. So
in March, you made a specific proposal in this motion. What is the core of that proposal? What's the key thing you would like to see?
I think the key thing is that we would have a separate audit committee that the internal audit that includes some outside people with some audit experience that the audit manager would prepare the reports directly to it. So instead of going through the city manager, being edited by the city manager, being controlled, they would go to the independent audit committee. Yeah,
your proposal G is the internal auditor shall provide all completed reports and audits directly to the internal audit committee. Mm-hmm. Given where we are right at the moment, that seems to be exactly the crux of the problem.
Well, what I'm concerned about more than anything else, there's different mechanisms we can use, but we want to get to transparency, and we want to get to confidence in city government. I mean, those are the very important elements that I think we could structure it different ways, but we ought to have, when we issue an audit, the public ought to be able to say, yes, this is good. We have confidence in this, and even if the report is citing a bunch of poor management procedures or whatever, at least the citizens can say, well, City Council was on it, now go ahead and do something about reforming.
Well, the administration, through the manager and through Rita McNeil, who's the city solicitor, which means the city's chief legal advisor, have raised all sorts of issues with your proposal, saying that it gives council powers that the charter doesn't give the council, that it removes powers that the manager ought to have under the charter. It raises a whole series of these. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I think this is a case where the lawyers are being used to avoid doing something the administration doesn't want to do. I mean, we've done some independent legal analysis. And it's pretty clear. One, our charter says very clearly the council has the authority to go out and hire auditors if we want to do that. But the second thing is what we're asking for is very much like other parts of city government, just like the Citizens Complaint Authority, where there is a separate board, and there is an investigator who's part of city government who prepares the reports directly for the outside board, not edited by the city manager. That's all we want. It's the same thing we've done.
Two members of that Citizens Complaint Authority were on this show last week to talk about that process, and that's one of the things that I know you've pointed out before, that the manager agreed to recently setting that up, and you're saying the model for what you're proposing is exactly the same?
I think it is. It's very similar, and there may be some uniquenesses that we need to tweak but what's happening, we're not getting a proposed ordinance, which is what we asked for, that we can even debate with our fellow council members. So, I mean, we need to get to that point. We need to get this coming forward.
You made the motion. They responded in writing ultimately, and it took a long time, as I see it, months and months. And now, in fact, this is coming back at a very time when now there's controversy about all of this, rather than doing it in a expeditious way. Besides these written communications, are you all talking together behind the scenes and trying to resolve this?
Are Pat and I talking?
No, you and Pat, that's easy. With the administration,
we have been. In fact, the solicitor was even at the law committee last week trying to get her to do this.
And I have talked to the manager about what my intentions are, what our intentions are, and I feel, Dan, that the manager is not. I don't feel the manager is stonewalling, but I feel that she's going about this in kind of a hesitancy, kind of hesitatingly. But I do believe that she's willing to work something out with us now. We don't have anything on the table, but I do believe that we'll get a proposed ordinance from the solicitor's office by next week, I would expect. Or
is that what you're expecting? Are you expecting an ordinance?
We've been waiting since March 18th, so I'm not.
I'm a little more optimistic than Pat is.
If you don't get that, could you go outside? I mean, Pat, you're a lawyer.
Right.
Could you draft the language of the ordinance yourself, or get help
I think that's all what we'll have to do is, you know, if they continue to refuse even to draft the ordinance, just go out and hire a law firm to do it.
And I've had contacts from people in the community, business people, who say, you're on the right track, this is the way the city should be going. You know, we've learned from Enron and WorldCom and others. Let's be transparent, and let's be objective, and let's go in this direction. So I think we'll get kind of, you know, technical help and political help that we'll need on this.
Where is the mayor on this?
The mayor seems to be against it. He was quoted in the
against
the
your proposal.
Yes, he was quoted in the paper criticizing it the other day.
And do you think that's because the immediate situation, his office is taking a hit on the Empire Theater in the original draft of that was done?
You know, I'd hate to think that's the motivation, but certainly, you know, some of the things that came out about the mayor's office in the Empire Theater were very damaging.
Dave, you're in the same political party, unlike Pat. Well, you talked to Charlie about this?
Have I talked to him? I have not talked to him in any depth. No, I have not. But you know, I have no problem about talking to Charlie about it. I feel if Charlie's got any hesitancy, it's more related to keeping the charter inviolate and along the lines that, you know, we're tinkering with the charter, and we're trying not to. We're trying to do this in a way that's consistent and under the charter provisions.
You know, one of the things that you know, the basic issue here is control of the manager over the audit function. One of the things that happened last week when Rich Jaffe was doing his story, he got called down to do an interview with the manager, and there's an exchange in that. It's the raw tape, but I'd like you to watch this. I'd like for people to see it. It's rough. It's not the sort of thing that normally gets aired, but I'd like for people to see the exchange that takes place here.
I think that the concern was that, very simply, the Internal Audit Committee should get the report simultaneously with the city manager.
Forgive me. You yourself said in there, I have it on tape, that you believed that the city manager's concern was in regards to controlling comments that were being made about the mayor and city council.
And what I said was that the internal audit function has no authority to audit by law, by administrative code, the mayor and members of city council.
Now, what you said was that after your discussions with the city manager, that you believed she was concerned about those comments.
Yes, I said that. I said that she was concerned because the internal audit function does not audit city council, does not audit the mayor. And what was in the draft report was not substantiated through interview with the mayor staff, council member staff.
Okay.
So again, we're just trying to get a good quality product that's consistent with what good business practices are, that makes sense, that is appropriate and applicable to findings. We're not trying to hide anything. We're not trying to cover up anything.
Were there legitimate points being made there, or was this a matter of Mueller having his story being twisted from the morning till the afternoon?
It seemed like a lot of spin was going on.
I think that Bill what he said here. What he said was the manager's concern was for the fact that the audit committee has no authority over council or the mayor, and he's saying a good audit would have allowed, if in fact that was going to be the way in that area, would have allowed for a response from them.
Okay, this is such an important issue for the long-term health of this city. We're going to stay with this, and we'll have you back as this develops, because this is just too important. Thank you for being here this morning. After the break, the search for early American photographic images created by one of Cincinnati's leading African-American citizens in the 1850s and 60s. Welcome back. The Cincinnati Museum Center and the Cincinnati Art Museum are collaborating on the organization of an exhibit featuring the work of James Presley Ball, an early daguerreotypist and photographer who worked in Cincinnati in the 1850s and 60s. Here's some background. Daguerreotypes were among the earliest and most striking forms of photography. The image is fixed onto a silver-coated copper plate, creating a mirror-like image that comes in and out of focus. Because one exposure took between 30 seconds and 4 minutes,
the person had to keep absolutely still with their eyes fixated and their mouth closed.
In 1847, James P. Ball, an African-American, opened what soon became one of the greatest daguerreotype studios in the United States on 4th Street in Cincinnati. Ball's skill and personality attracted thousands of white Cincinnatians as customers, including its leading citizens like General William Lytle.
Ball's work is especially notable for its clarity, its expressiveness, its attention to detail. Ball was described as a sweet spirit of human excellence and the very essence of politeness.
But his historically most important images were of members of the Cincinnati black community, including many family members and friends.
Rather than being portrayed as they had been in popular illustrations and fine painting as exotic others with exaggerated facial features, they were portrayed as middle-class, serious, earnest, hard-working people.
Whether it's the image of a famous abolitionist like Frederick Douglass or the children and grandparents of people whose names we no longer know, J.P. Ball's daguerreotypes and photographs stood in his day and our day as dignified answers to American slavery and the ugly, vicious, racist assumptions upon which it stood. I am now joined by Theresa Leininger-Miller, the curator of the upcoming exhibit on, exhibits on J.P. Ball, and an expert on Ball. You spent a lot of years working on this. That package that we did together was 10 years ago. And,
hard to believe.
and I have to say that we both look better now than we did. Daguerreotypes. What was that? What is the form of early photography that really was? It's a strange name for people.
It is. It's based on a Frenchman, Louis Mandé Jacques Daguerre, and so he named the process after himself. It was the first practical photographic process that Daguerre invented in 1839, and as you indicated in the earlier segment, it's a silver-coated copper plate that's made light-sensitive by exposure to light, and then it's processed through vapor of mercury. And then it becomes a unique image. There is no negative. It's one of a kind, and that's what makes them so collectible and so interesting and almost ghost-like in their appearance because they go in and out of focus.
And I think we have some tape we could run that kind of shows some of that again. Yes, you can see it on the screen right now. As you move it, it just does literally become a mirror. And you don't even see the image, you almost see yourself.
Well, you do see yourself, and that's part of the charm of it, is that you see yourself seeing the image, so you become a part of history in a way.
Now, Ball not only used that technology, but he moved on to other types of technology as well, right?
He did. The height of daguerreotypy was really in the 1840s and 50s, and by the end of the 50s, we began to get a paper process known as the carte de visite, French for visiting card, because these images were paper mounted on cardboard about the size of a visiting card, about 2 by 3 or 4 inches.
Now, with those, and I think we've got some examples of those as well that we can show people, with those, there are a lot more of them out there. It was a less expensive product. It was easier to move around, literally, because it was on paper. Right. Your suspicion is that there might be families out there right now who their grandparents or their great-grandparents left them this box of photographs that they don't really quite know what to do with. You think there's still Ball images out there?
I'm positive there must be images by both J.P. Ball and his partner, Alexander Thomas. And Ball also worked with his brothers, Robert and Thomas, and his father. So there were a number of partnerships that took place in the 1850s and 60s. And we would be thrilled to find out about more images in the community, especially because the images that we have, most of them in the Historical Society of African Americans are anonymous. We don't know the sitters' identities, and we would really like to find out who these people are, what they did in their lifetimes, and how they knew Ball and Thomas.
So in this case, there were people of the African American community who were going to Ball and Thomas to have their images created, but also people from the white community who were going. So these could be any place in our community.
That's right. They could be anywhere. And particularly I would hope that they would be in the communities that are oldest in Cincinnati. That makes good sense. But it seems as though the people who had a bit more money would go to Ball, even though he advertised his image as being the most beautiful, the most lifelike, the most durable, and the cheapest. A lot of people went to Ball for different reasons. Sometimes it was because they were interested in abolition, as Ball was, or they were connected by religious, civic, or social groups.
You know, when you think about these early images, no matter what the technology was, you know, today, you know, we kind of snap off photographs with digital and all of that. Yeah. How do you think Ball, how do you think these early daguerreotypists, photographers, how do you think they thought about their work? Did they think of it as just recording, or was it an art, or what? How did they think about it?
Well, that's an excellent question, and it's one that still intrigues historians of photography, because it's only been in the 20th century that photography's been viewed as an art, and that art museums have really begun to collect it actively. Certainly some did it in the late 19th century, but initially it was seen as such a marvel, an exciting technological marvel. You couldn't believe that your image could be captured by the sun's rays, fixed on a plate like that. And the exacting realism was so much more superior than anything that was evident in oil painting. But initially, artists did also, or we're now calling them artists, but photographers would claim that they had artistic superiority and that they did have artistic qualities. In fact, they would go so far as to retouch the black and white images with painting, including work by the renowned landscapist Robert Duncanson. He worked hand-tinting photographs for Ball. And they would say that their works were superior to miniatures, to oils on ivory, because they combined that realism with this incredible beauty of the aesthetics of painting.
With this exhibit, or these exhibits that you're putting together, there's going to be a component at the Cincinnati Museum Center, there's going to be a component at the Cincinnati Art Museum. How are those going to get divided? Are you going to take different approaches, look at these images through different lenses?
We are, and it's still in the planning stages, but the thought at this point is that we would show about 40 daguerreotypes by Ball and possibly as many as 100 carte de visites and several dozen cabinet cards. Those were larger images that came about in the 1870s, 1880s. At the Art Museum, emphasizing the aesthetic qualities of these portraits. Almost all of them are small images of people, but there are a few outdoor scenes. There are also prints that Ball had made after his works. Ergot and Forberger was a local publisher, and they would do images of Spring Grove Cemetery or Wilberforce University, and they credited Ball, which was highly unusual, that it would say lithograph after photograph by J.P. Ball. Extremely unusual during the time of slavery for an African-American man to get such public credit for his work. So that's one segment at the Art Museum. And at the Historical Society, we hope to explore the cultural, social, political ramifications, the connections that people had, have maps of the city, maybe even recreate the studio that you saw earlier in the wood engraving, and possibly recreate the panorama, Ball's amazing anti-slavery panorama that he commissioned of a team of African-American artists in 1855.
Which then traveled to the East Coast, and the script still exists. It's really interesting to see that script. Worked on it with Duncanson. Well,
we can't say that for sure, but it's highly likely.
I thought that. It's been a while since I read the script. But anyway, how many images do we know of that exist right now that are connected to Ball?
You know, I just counted these a couple of weeks ago, and I'm astounded to find that because collections are coming up all the time on the internet, on eBay, people are telling me about things. I now know of over, this figure astounds me, over 650 images by Ball, which makes it the largest body of work by any African-American artist before the 20th century.
Wow.
It's amazing, and it's our hometown hero.
And hometown hero is not well known at this point.
Yes,
although I
exactly.
do want to say that there is a book that's published.
There is. It's a fabulous book by Deborah Willis called J.P. Ball, a daguerrean and studio photographer. It was published in 1993 by Garland, and includes many of his images in our collection in the Cincinnati Historical Society, which now has about 245 of Ball's works, the nation's largest collection, as well as about 10 other collections nationwide and a number of private collections.
Well, I want people to be able to get in touch if they have some images in their collection. And let me put up a couple of pieces of information about where they can call.
Great.
One, they can call you, Dr. Theresa Leininger-Miller, at the University of Cincinnati, 556-0273. And your email there is, well, teresa.leininger@uc.edu. Or you can go to the Cincinnati Historical Society and call Linda Bailey, who's the photographic curator, 513-287-7094. When do you expect these exhibits to be mounted?
We hope that it'll appear in early 2006, but we're still in the planning stages and doing fundraising, so it may be postponed to the fall of 2006 or early 2007.
Okay. Thank you very much, and good luck
welcome.
with this. Good luck with this project.
Thank
we'll follow it. Thank you for joining us and making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. We wish you a happy new year and hope that you will join us again next year in an interview next Sunday with the new president of the University of Cincinnati, Nancy Zimpher. Have a good celebration for New Year's.